history from 1969 to 2000. I'm Curtis Manning, and we are continuing our exploration, the chronological exploration of St. Bernard history from the very prehistoric times, and we've reached almost to the present. In the general approach of the lectures are hopefully going to one day go into a book, a manuscript on the history of St. Bernard. So in other words, each of the lectures is designed to be a chapter. Today's chapter will follow a similar approach that we've looked at over the time, where kind of in this particular take on the great and varied and diverse history of St. Bernard Parish, the major division has been in three geographic divisions of the parish: the upper parish, the middle parish, and the lower parish. Pretty much have had drastically different and intermixing histories. All right, and so which has been fascinating. Likewise, throughout history, we see another commonality of a connection to New Orleans, not surprising. And in this, especially with shipping or bootlegging or other type trading possibilities with New Orleans because of the geographical setup of St. Bernard once again. And in this one, maybe more so than others, this connection to New Orleans is going to have a great effect on our history. That's interesting. Another commonality that often takes center stage through it in many of the chapters, but surprisingly in this chapter does not even raise its head, is the idea of hurricanes. All right, of course, there are going to be some, but no major ones that have just greatly impacted the parish, like last time when we talked about Betsy and Camille, and especially, of course, like the next chapter when maybe that's the storm. So, as we're talking about, we'll get right into it about St. Bernard Parish then. So, first starting in Upper St. Bernard. In each of the chapters, I always talk about where the action is, where most of the good stuff is happening. And in this chapter, it's pretty much all going to be in Upper St. Bernard, based on the dramatic growth that has occurred in the middle part of the century especially. And I would say that in this era, hopefully, from an outsider's perspective, is when St. Bernard kind of becomes the parish, and I've heard that a lot. And mainly an urban veteran community in Arabian Chalmette. So there's such a dramatic growth in the population of St. Bernard and what we're calling Upper St. Bernard that extends kind of all the way pretty much to violence. That is the parish. Now in the middle parish, which is where St. Bernard started, known as Lanio settlements, there's not going to be the great population growth that not happened there, or of course the lower parish, which maybe is losing population. So, and the numbers tell it all. This is why kind of we'll change the chapter. When we talked about it last time, from the parish is going to have 3,000 to 7,000 people over a century. Huge amount of time with almost incremental growth until we get about to 1950. And then from 1950 to 1980, you'll see just amazing, incredible growth. From about 11,000, which has been a pretty good amount of growth at that time, until 1980, up to the mid-60s. Right? And of course, for this chapter, we see the rest of the story. From 1980 to 2000 and beyond, there's almost no growth. There's stasis. The community has developed, and it pretty much stays put with no growth at all. And of course, we'll see why that might happen. And by the way, of course, the 67,000 is going to be about the same up to Katrina, and then it'll change dramatically. All right, so and in this plateau of the population that occurred right around 1980, not surprisingly, is going to be because, in large part, of the plateau of prosperity of opportunity. We saw that around World War II and after, great number of jobs were created after the Great Depression and the GIs being away. The economy is going to take off. All these national and state changes are going to filter through to St. Bernard, and Upper St. Bernard will take on more state and national characteristics with this great population growth. In addition, as we talked about in the 1950s, Kaiser Aluminum will set up shop as well as other very good industrial jobs. Kaiser has a huge amount of prosperity, 2,700 jobs at its sites. A lot of that is going to count on oil refineries and doing very well, all that is going to account for this great increase in population and prosperity. This is going to reverse pretty dramatically in the 1980s. All right? And for several things, the most important local difference is Kaiser and the job creating potential. Because of worldwide conditions, that there's going to be both a high labor costs and then a aluminum glut, which is what Kaiser made. And so by 1981, the production of aluminum is going to be curtailed greatly. And in 1983, Kaiser is just a shell of its former self. So pretty much all those jobs are going to go away in very quick time because of the worldwide conditions. And so without those, then there's going to be no draw to bring more folks in. Likewise, there's going to be an oil bust in the mid-1980s. I guess we talked a lot about that Louisiana is an oil state, as is Texas. So whenever oil prices are very high, Louisiana and the state government and others do very, very well. And so in the very early 1980s, following on one in the early 1970s as well, there was a huge unprecedented spike in oil prices, and thus times were very, very good in Louisiana. But by the mid-1980s, 1985 especially, there's an oil glut, oil prices tank, and a lot of the economy of Louisiana and then St. Bernard's and those possibilities is going to go with it. So, I'm sure most people know, but so I hear talk of fellow professors, college professors, many of which lost their jobs in the mid-1980s because the state government lost so much oil revenue that there's not going to be enough to pay and they're laid off and all that kind of stuff. And that's going to go through pretty much all of society. So, the 1980s, the economy in Louisiana is down, and of course it's going to come through St. Bernard, which is going to lead to no population growth, but also other possibilities as well, that we'll talk about a little bit. Likewise, another big national change that I think is going to greatly affect not just St. Bernard, but Louisiana as well, and it's going to undo the benefits of one of the key cultural attributes that we've talked about a lot, and that is the change in nature of jobs, especially to be able to get middle-class salaries, which has always been the key. So up until the 1980s, and these are kind of more slow, fundamental changes, but basically with a few different things happening, manufacturing is going to start moving abroad, moving to third world countries in large numbers, and especially the lower skilled manufacturing jobs that up to this point pay a lot of money. And you could have, a person could have a job there and provide a very comfortable middle-class lifestyle, all right? With the oil glut in the mid-80s as well, a lot of these old jobs fit that bill as well, working offshore, working in refineries, other stuff. And those also, when they went away in the mid-80s, when the oil business kind of did recover, a lot of those jobs went to Houston and stayed in Houston, a lot of reasons. In addition to manufacturing jobs moving abroad, there's the whole thing with automation in manufacturing. Computers started being used much more frequently. All that with the result of kind of upper end jobs that might need a college education, were plentiful and provided a middle class lifestyle. But a lot of the medium skilled, lower skilled jobs are not going to be available as much. The computer automation are going to take care of that. And so what the result of it is that the less than college degree type jobs that were plentiful in Louisiana are not going to be as available. And so, as we'll see in a little bit, we've been talking about in St. Bernard Parish especially, there have been so many opportunities living off the land and trapping and fishing and other stuff, but also all of these industrial jobs. There's been really no need for a strong emphasis on higher education especially. And so, and that had served St. Bernard people very well up to this point. But with these national, international changes, a lot of that's going to shift in the 1980s and is going to affect us going forward. And by the way, that's not just St. Bernard, that's pretty much most of Louisiana as well. So, but in Upper St. Bernard, it's going to be very interesting, and this is a little bit harder for me to quantify and get images for and all that. And as a historian, I'm going to try, but I see the trends that we've been talking about this whole way, that even though pretty much all of that huge population, the vast majority of that huge population that came into St. Bernard, that came into Upper St. Bernard, came mostly from outside of St. Bernard. And a lot of it's going to be in New Orleans. And so, but that being said, it seems like, because of the interaction, because of kind of like-minded people, that the values shared by all these new folks in St. Bernard were very similar to the ones who've been here for the whole time. So in other words, the Islamio culture and some of the other immigrant groups that have been here kind of got infused, and there was maybe what I would call mostly assimilation, but it was of a lot of the same values, right? And so, and really, a lot of this, which we'll talk about it, kind of, it goes back to, in my educated opinion anyway, goes back to the idea that a lot of the immigrant groups that came in were like-minded to start with, going way back or whatever, but so most of the 49, this all explains, I think, why St. Bernard and Louisiana is very different than the rest of the country, but the institutions of the other 49 states, because of the history, mostly came from the original 13 colonies, which were very heavily influenced by Great Britain, different immigrant groups from Great Britain. So the law system, the politics, all these things, like we've talked about executive centralism, will continue, which is having very strong executives. The rest of the country followed the British model, which had incredibly weak executives, and thus town councils and more democratic systems that kind of filtered from the original 13 colonies up. And of course, Louisiana, we joined late, after 1800, and so we kind of kept ours as well. So a lot of these things, so mostly the British influence is felt in America in general and other 49 states. However, in Louisiana, we mostly had Spanish and French people that settled us. And even into the late 1800s, people would consider themselves that and not American. And so those were both what we might call Mediterranean countries around Europe, but also very heavily Catholic, very heavily kind of a top-down, king-based, monarchy-based system, but also very heavily anti-British. And so had historical competition with Britain all this time, though they all were powers. So that kind of explains the Spanish Islamio mainly fit that bill, as did the French, but also the Italians, especially the Southern Italians, which is another Mediterranean country, heavily Catholic, which one of the main immigrant groups to come over to St. Bernard in Louisiana, going to fit right into that culture. But also even the Irish, of course, we have the Irish and Italian Islamio. The Irish were definitely not a Mediterranean type country. However, they were absolutely anti-British. And anything that Britain, they were Catholic too, but anything that Britain did, they reacted against it, which fit in with others as well. All right? So even though a lot of the people that came to Upper St. Bernard were not from Lower Middle St. Bernard because of the huge population increase, but a lot of the values were shared. All right? So, and it gets tough to talk about values. We can talk about it the whole time. So a lot of these things that were, especially like I would say in the Lower St. Bernard, Delacroix kind of culture, like not moving out of the parish. That you had it again and again where families settled around the corner and kids settled around the corner. And next chapter we talk about Katrina, which is one part of the great tragedy, and in fact had my in-laws and everybody that I knew, that there were that it just people settled and were so happy to be in the parish and didn't want to go elsewhere. That kind of insular nature, which by the way, Louisiana, unique among all other states. Maybe 78% of people born in Louisiana were born here, whereas the next highest state is somewhere down in the 60s. All right, and I think St. Bernard shares that as well because of these cultures. But anyway, so not moving out of the parish, a cultural attribute that kind of was infused in the upper parish. These very, very strong family ties and not wanting to get away from those. Just a satisfaction with the culture, which not even wanting to maybe leave the parish all the time a little bit. I mean, of course, doing that and all that, but just this idea of the hometown thing, this lack of emphasis on formal education, but not intelligence or practical education or all that stuff, or hard work. Then there's very strong ties to the land, which even when we get north of St. Bernard, some of the opportunities, the hugely lucrative tracking and fishing and other stuff, some of that's going to continue, but a lot of opportunities are not going to continue up to the 80s, 90s and all that. But even without those, there's going to maintain this very strong connection to the land. And then finally, as we've talked about a lot, we'll continue again this idea of executive centralism, that system is going to continue. All right, so with that then, going on to the government, and when last we talked about the government going all the way through, when we talked about especially with Leander Perez, had pretty firm control over most elements of local government for a very long time, even though he was from Plaquemines Parish, but his position as DA was used to kind of control both. All right? He died in 1969, as we talked about, but the concept of executive centralism will continue. At the time, Plaquemines and St. Bernard had kind of shared district attorneys, though there were sheriffs that were unique to the two ones, and the sheriff was very important. So we left the story. Jack Riley was the sheriff. He's going to continue, as it's incredibly rare for any sheriff to be unelected. You know, as we've seen, they served for a very long time. So Jack Riley continued to be sheriff until about 1978. But at that time, a new judicial district was created. And so, in other words, what it means from a power position was the district attorney position was split. So St. Bernard got its own district attorney, and the Plaquemines, of course, had theirs. When that happened, and it kind of shows that that was a dominant position, Jack Riley decided he would no longer be sheriff. He's going to be elected to be DA, and he will be the DA until just before his death in 2014. All right. So he's going to be elected from 1979 until 2014. And I had the opportunity to meet him one time, and he's a very nice guy. But when in his newspaper obituary, there are things that kind of indicate this executive centralism, where I think it was one of James Bond, one of the sheriff candidates said, if you ever want to run for elected office in St. Bernard, then you go talk to Jack Riley. All right, so scandal-free, all that kind of stuff as far as I can tell, but I think that power, that executive centralism continued. All right, then, all right, so that's it. And there were other similar comments as well. Then Ralph McDougall will become the elected sheriff right afterwards. As soon as Rowley moved over to DA, Ralph McDougall will be sheriff, and it will be that way until 1984. Generally, and this is going to be for only the first time, going back all the way to LA, Doc Miro, I think in 1924, is going to be the only next time that an incumbent sheriff is not reelected. And apparently, it was very interesting. I'm still looking for this. I couldn't get a lot of sources on it, which I was surprised. I thought it'd be all over the paper and all that kind of stuff. But there was a drug investigation. And we also talked about one of the themes of St. Bernard Parish and all the way back was the idea of bootlegging and other stuff. And there was a drug, as best I could tell, there was a drug investigation involving drugs out of Rigolets that Ralph McDougal was caught up in. But as far as I could tell, 4 deputies were arrested and charged and convicted of the thing, but I don't think he was. But because of the notoriety, I guess, of the ongoing investigation at the time, a very young administrator in the police jury named Jack Stevens is going to run against him, and he will win. All right. So Jack Stevens will be sheriff. Then so he unseats the incumbent, which goes against the executive centralism idea, but there was that same kind of circumstance. And so Jack Stevens will be sheriff until 2012, and he will be didn't quite get to be the longest serving sheriff. That went back to E.E. Nunez back in from 1879 to 1909. We talked about him. So kind of the second longest. So he's going to serve for 28 years, and then he will be, so those two will kind of continue the executive centralism circumstances in government. And of course, just in the recent years, that has changed. And I'm sure it's changed since then. Like I'm sure it's gone to a very different system under the new folks that I know. We'll find out. So we'll come back in 25, 30 years and redo this, and we'll get updated on all that. All right, so moving on then from governments. I don't know if anybody, I imagine some people went through and might have some good stories about all that, but I don't know if we want to record any of these. I don't know. I won't show that. All right, so moving on then, let's talk again about desegregation. Last time we talked about the early, of course, especially with Leander Perez, who I think was pretty much a national level segregationist leader, though I've read some other stuff that said he might be more regional. But I think it's not surprising then that St. Bernard, as we talked about, as well as New Orleans, had strong resistance to integration early on. Though it was notable that there was not violence relative to many other places. All right, so we had discovered last time is that in the lower ninth ward, there had been the first New Orleans integration. Leander Perez had been instrumental in stopping that. And in fact, one of the ways he did that was to set up a school for a year in St. Bernard, where New Orleans white students could come until a separate private school could be set up in the lower ninth ward, in the ninth ward anyway. And that was one of the traditional ways of resistance, is setting up a private school parallel to the public school. All right, so, but in St. Bernard, as we move forward then, the way St. Bernard is going to have that resistance, but in a unique way, and that is to have separate by gender. And so there's never any violence, but this gender separation, especially in high schools and the middle schools, one of the, I guess, reasons to resist integration at the time for people who want to do that was the worry about, I guess, mixing in romantic senses and all that. And so this was a way, I guess, to get around all that, kind of have a loophole on that. So, as we see, there was an open defiance to integration as early as the school board minutes of 1958, and it was a proclamation that, we can talk where there will be no integration, and that proclamation is sent to the governor, to the president, everybody. All right. So then, as we talked about the fighting, so by the mid-1960s, especially as Leander Perez is fighting in New Orleans, it seemed like that's not going to go forward. And so the handwriting law, especially because by the mid-1960s and with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, there was a very strong weapon of federal funding of K-12 education. And so there started to be a series of ways to try to have some non-integration, but to still keep the federal funding coming in. All right, so that's where pretty much the gender separation scheme happened and it pretty much worked. But so in 1965 was going to be the plans to start constructing enough separate high schools. There was a plan, but in a very slow, incremental rolling out of it. All right, so once again, kind of skirt that line. So 1967 to with a plan for all boys high schools of Chalmette and St. Bernard, and then the all girls schools, PTG Beauregard and Andrew Jackson. And so at least the article that I read is by 1984, the plan had been fully implemented with gender segregated high schools and middle schools, and there were a few others as well, but not elementary schools. Those were boys and girls. All right, so that lasted through the 1980s. However, there was a series of lawsuits that really threatened the federal funding, which by this time there was also in the mid-1960s with Lyndon Johnson's Great Society plans, there was an incredible increase in federal funding of K-12 schools. So especially by the 1980s, and there was a consent decree, various lawsuits, so the handwriting was on the wall that there would be consequences, especially with federal funding. And so those are going to, so 1987 is going to do this consent decree, and then incrementally after that, the gender things kind of went away. And kind of related, as we talked about with Leander Perez and naming Judge Perez for it, by 1999, it was kind of the association maybe with the fighting of integration and all that, and what I thought was kind of very liberal kind of way too, but Judge Perez was renamed for Judge Melvin Perez in 1999, and then to kind of have that where you have to change all the business cards. That's kind of all right. Nobody wants to add any to that. That's kind of a quick overview. All right. So let's then move on.
So one comment.
Oh, sure.
We're talking about changing Marlboro South Boys.
Uh-huh.
One of the complaints were that they offered different classes at the two different schools, and they had different sports teams. So there was a complaint that the boys at the one school didn't have the same opportunity as those classes. It wasn't just the segregation; it was what was offered, the difference between the schools too. My kids were in school at the time, so and then, as a matter of fact, the lawsuit that ended it was a young man who complained because he wasn't offered the same classes that were offered at girls' school.
In this article, it did say that there was something like 13 scholarship recipients to four-year colleges, and 12 of those were girls. Kind of implicating that it was that there was the difference in the teaching as well. So interesting. And so was it? I guess around like the way things were presented is that it kind of was the person writing the articles was very heavily not in favor of how it went down in St. Bernard and all that kind of stuff. But even she indicated that she was impressed that it seemed to forestall, any kind of violence. Whereas in other places that were done much more quickly or whatever, there was often violence and all that. And so I didn't know was there, from the things I read anyway, it didn't seem like it was, there were obviously things that came up, it was relatively peaceful. But it's hard to, those kind of social things are a little bit hard to do. Okay, very interesting. All right, so let's see about, so this is really for, I think I jumped ahead a little bit on the slides, but so with Middle St. Bernard, which we'll do next, so Upper St. Bernard then is, so by the time I get here in 2000, it has been so developed in the population in Arabi and Chalmette, those areas maybe going into Mirror Road, that's kind of what most people outside will know what Parish is. All right, so Middle St. Bernard, for anybody new here, these are what we're calling the original settlement of this lingo. So kind of from really along Bayou Terrebonne, in St. Bernard, and kind of going from the Poydras, where kind of intersects the Mississippi River kind of on the back, but not all the way down to the far reaches, all right? So pretty much there's not a lot of growth there. The political power, which had been there in earlier times, is not so much anymore. A lot of that, all that is shifted pretty much to Upper Parish. But so there's this assimilation somewhat. There's not a stark difference. However, there is still the same kind of values that have been kind of opposed on. So there's not a big difference. This is just my way of trying to figure out these geographical differences. So I would say that whereas violence, which up to about this chapter, the one before, has really been part of Upper St. Bernard as the very edge. It wasn't part of that core original Isleño settlements. But violence, in my mind, has been pretty much become associated with what we're calling Middle St. Bernard. And I would say it becomes the largest part of Middle St. Bernard at this time. Like a lot more people have come there, often from the lower reaches of the parish. And then with Miro, maybe being the separating part, if we can figure that out. So, really interesting. There's also interesting that we talked about that the high point of especially lower St. Bernard is Isleño culture, Spanish-speaking, dance halls, taking the whole family to go trapping, those kind of things, had really peaked in the 1940s, and that was the high point. Right? Then after that, there was a slow decline, not going away or anything, but a slow decline. One with these intrusions of modernity, like with the roads, the industrial jobs, high-paying jobs available in Upper St. Bernard, all that kind of stuff, going hand in hand with the land loss, which is very gradual and long-lasting. And we're going to talk about that a little later on today. So there's been kind of a decline of the culture itself. However, in Middle St. Bernard, during this time, we're going to see the rise of almost nostalgia for this Isleño culture. They're going to kind of recapture maybe what wasn't around every day. So we're going to see that there were two separate and competing Isleño clubs will form, and kind of reading, there's a lot of information on these two, reading between the lines, it was kind of seemed to me more of an Isleño club associated with Middle St. Bernard in that history, and an Isleño club associated with Lower St. Bernard. All right, so very good to kind of bring back the culture, as well as the Los Isleños Museum Complex, which is very impressive, and that it's going to be the Ducros Museum will come about in 1971. It'll be donated, it'll be a library, and then a little bit later on, the rest of the buildings, like in 1980, the land for I think everybody's hopefully been to the Isleño Museum Complex, but the other buildings about 1980 after a trip with one of these groups to the Canary Islands, and then so Manuel Malero's daughters are going to give the land as well as work out with some of the buildings and everything. So really by 19, and then the parish is going to take over that too. That was a little complicated story, but from 1980 on, really a very impressive Isleño Museum Complex with a lot of activities will be established. Kind of like a nostalgia, because a lot of the hardcore culture that we've talked about has kind of faded away a little bit, so that naturally try to bring some of that back. And then Frank Fernandez, who is, he will be by 1967, I think he's going to be the parish historian, and he's going to do a lot of the work of the parish history. And I know that Bill Highland and Tony Fernandez, who I consider some of the top local historians, especially about the Isleño side of things, credit him greatly, kind of bringing back and a lot of research on Isleño history. All right, so then, go back, I was out of order. And so down to Lower St. Bernard, and so Lower St. Bernard, or kind of what maybe we're calling way down the road, that definitely the generalized culture hangs on, but it is mostly older folks. And so we talked about that, as we talked about last time, from the 1940s on, especially with a lot of opportunities with the education, with the children now being educated, especially in English. All those things we talked about, that the young folks kind of started moving up the road, moving to Upper or Middle St. Bernard, But of course, the people who live there will not going to leave, and still the culture is very strong. But so that being said, we talk about maybe the younger generation of those who stuck around, the ones born in the high point around 1945. By the 1990s, they're in their 50s. And so there's not these younger generations who are staying down there, but very strong culture for them. And what I kind of call them the Spanish speakers, the ones that maybe were born about 1915, who Spanish was the first language, very few outsiders came in, lived off the land, all that kind of stuff. It really was maintained at least through the 40s, if not beyond. So the Spanish speakers then are going to be in their 80s. And so down the road culture, very strong, but just older. And so we'll see, very interesting, with the population of Delacroix, Iowa anyway. So 1891 had about 300 people. 1940, which was this high point, which was when the trapping especially was very, very lucrative. We talked about the 1920s, where a trapper in just a 2 or 3 month season would make more money than the government. That kind of prosperity at that high level didn't last, but it's going to come pretty dang close. Be very, very prosperous through the 1940s. But then with all these changes that we talked about, by 1981, it was said that there was about 165 residences in Delacroix, which, with old population, to my mind, that's about 300 people, which will put it exactly the population in 1891. All right, so very interesting. And the same is, of course, the sources that I could get were kind of, during different times, this was about 1981, but it also, they did a study of White Klosky as well, and they said, or it might have been White Klosky and Shell Beach, it said that about 100, but in White Klosky, 124 residences. So by that time, which of course, that was, Delacroix at the time was a lot bigger than the others, when they all considered themselves separate. Last time we talked about it's kind of merged fishing communities. And so White Klosky was about as big in that 1981. All right, so now moving on then. So that was kind of a general thing. And we'll talk about the big part then, the big story this time, where the action is land laws. Really, it goes back much further. And we will, we talked about the two-front war on this traditional culture, especially of the lower St. Bernard folks, but it extended further. And that was the first part of the war was the so-called intrusions of Ontario. There was a lot more to do for the young folks, the education. And surprisingly, one of the big things was roads. Up until, I think it was the 1920s, there were no roads to Delacroix, and electricity came first in the 1940s and that kind of stuff. So just to update that, is in 1981, or soon thereafter, where Judge Perez is going to be extended all the way to Regina. So now, as they said in the thing, where before you had the non-paved roads, and eventually you had Bayou Road, which was fine, but it was kind of dangerous at times and other stuff. But then we had a 4-lane road, like there's no, the intrusion might be already complete, there's no difference kind of thing to come and go and all that. And so, but that's just to continue what we talked about last time. The big part of that will be land laws. And so I think this will be fairly familiar as well. And so the land law started way back when. In the 1920s, it's going to first start with the increased levies. All these things are pretty much going to be seen as good at the time. But as we know, especially we talked about the 1927 flood, but it started a little bit before then, we'll get some dates in a second, where as soon as the levees would be overtopped quite a bit, which is how the land was built up and how the subsidence was combated and all that stuff. All the good environmental stuff came from the river overtopping things. But of course, lots of bad came from that, and it would just kill the prosperity in New Orleans and other places when everything was flooded. So with the increase in levees and more effective levees, starting in 1917 and after, but especially after the 1927 flood, and the federal government's going to get involved, we'll talk about that, incredibly effective leveeing and other things of the Mississippi River all the way through, which was a very good thing for the people in St. Bernard as well. However, then, as I'm sure everybody knows, as far as land loss, there's a natural subsidence anyway, which is always replenished by the overtopping. So you remove that overtopping, and the land is going to start sinking. Very slowly, but it started then, and of course it's going to pick up later on. 1930s, that is going to be exacerbated by oil and gas canals. We talked about finding of oil, very good thing, at least for a few leaders of, for this executive centralism kind of thing. But to get at the oil, but it allowed a lot of prosperity, a lot of jobs, a lot of good parts, but to get at it, had to make these big canals. Didn't know at the time. At the time, you see accounts where even the down the road folks said, "This is great. We have direct lines to get to our tracks and all these other things too." But of course, as we know now, the rest of the story, it's going to allow more salt water to come in, which is going to move the land a little bit. It's going to do all the other stuff. It's going to lead to more land loss. The marsh buggies, which this came up again and again. I've never actually seen one, but I've seen pictures. But apparently the marsh buggies were so effective that they would trample all the land of muskrats and other stuff. So it's going to have not only the less land and increased water, but the building practices are going to hurt as well. Very slow, incremental effects, but eventually it's going to really affect the livelihoods as well as the land itself. All right, so by 1944 then, so this is all before we're not even talking about Mr. Go yet, which was the big thing of all this, but it happened before. So by 1944, it was noticed, both the saltwater intrusion and the ground subsidence, all right, around World War II. And so people started turning from the soil. So it's kind of around this time, remember we talked about last time, that Delacroix used to be on both sides of the bayou, and there were farms. So there were rows of houses on both sides of the bayou, and beyond that, there was farmland. But, and even places where you had to get to farm and buy a P-road or something. However, certainly by 1961, I never figured out exactly when, Delacroix was only on one side of the bayou, but by the 1940s, the farm is increased enough that the farming is going away. And you hear all kinds of stories. I had a lot of them where they would roast acorns in Delacroix because there's so many other trees and bears and all that kind of stuff. So, but apparently by this time they're not. And so, but even by then it's going to be noticed. By the 1960s, it'll really be noticed. And so, I'll just give examples of these, but I know you've heard a lot about them. So around 1980, people are giving them memories going way back. But so an 86-year-old in Delacroix said that the water in Bayou Terrebuffs was fresh enough to drink all the way up because it was mostly river water that had been overflowed. But when the levees cut off Bayou Terrebuffs, then there's no fresh water coming in, so the salt water is going to be too salty. So people would say you can wash your clothes, and they did wash their clothes and drink in it, but then it gradually became too salty, so which killed the vegetation, all that kind of stuff too. All right, and then, but the thing I couldn't imagine, so this is a 70-year-old man in the 1980s, is at Shell Beach. As a kid, he would play baseball at Fort Proctor. And Fort Proctor was something like 600 yards from the shore. And so, and in my entire thing, now of course it's very distant, you can barely see it. But the land extended so much beyond that, which makes sense because you're going to build a fort on the bayou where you can, it's defensive. But anyway, so all this has happened even before we get to the Mr. Go, which we talked about. Other 1960s, memories. So you're talking about the 1960s, a trapper he set his traps and they were risky, but by the time of the 60s, he figures out it comes up to his elbows. So nothing a big effect of those kind of things. And, a bunch more stuff too. We can talk about that. But so the land loss started early on and is going to continue on, but the Mr. Go is going to make all that exponential. So that becomes very, very important. So the history of Mr. Go kind of goes back much further and involves other kind of fascinating things, or at least fascinating to me. So the Army Corps of Engineers was one of the key ones, of course, in building it and other things. Army Corps of Engineers goes back to 1824. As we mentioned, mostly from levees on Mississippi River. The first federal involvement was 1917, but the real federal involvement was 1928, after the 1927 flood, and that was the so-called, like, that's when the federal government took control of the management of the Mississippi River, and it was eventually designed, you'll hear about something called the Jadwin Plan, which was a very informal way of deciding all this very expensive and important stuff. It was kind of it's a crazy way. It was decided the Jadwin Plan was adopted, and basically it was the idea of doing levees, but also other stuff of levees, floodways, spillways, whatever. So to really monitor that flow, which we know is going to have a bad effect, but at the time it was very good. And so I just stuck that in there in the Army Corps of Engineers. It was in 1936 under the same approach, of which Mr. Goes would be one more part of it. What is the Morganza floodway? It was part of that, but I had not realized it was that early when it was authorized and built in 1930. All right. So another part of what's eventually going to become the issue of Mr. Go is going to be what we know as the Intracoastal Waterway, or as more technically the Gulf Intracoastal Waterway. And that was very important, which I did not realize what it was, but just that Intracoastal Waterway. So going back to the times before railroads, and especially before other stuff, that for trucks and all that, moving things on water is only game in town. So it's incredibly important to the federal government to safely move goods on water, and that's really was the most important part of St. Bernard was the Bayou St. John ports. This is the 1700s. Before during sailing ships, the Mississippi would silt up, and sometimes ships would get stuck for months at the front of it and all that. The Bayou St. John port on Lake Pontchartrain was something like the 7th or 8th largest port in the nation, because it would go through Lake Pontchartrain, through Lake Bourne, hug the coast, the Mobile and these other places. And whereas, and it was not, you could have bigger boats, but it was very reliable. Whereas in the Mississippi River, like I said, you could wait months, and it's very hard to get a sailing ship out the Mississippi River, and sandbars would occur and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so that was a very big deal. And so at that time, it was in the federal interest to have safe shipping. So if you go out in open water, like in the Mississippi River, Gulf of Mexico, storms and early on pirates and all that, so the insurance rates were very high. But if you could have an inland route, or an intra-coastal, by the coast, or in the coast, waterway, then it's much cheaper and better. So, and this intra-coastal waterway then is going to be built in stages with a big national priority from Texas all the way through the panhandle of Florida, weaving way all the way in. And a big part of that always is going to be from Lake Pontchartrain to, all along the coast. So this is early on, it's like 1700s on the Mississippi River. Like I said, you could wait months, and it's very hard to get a sailing ship out the Mississippi River, and sandbars would occur and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so that was a very big deal. And so at that time, it was in the federal interest to have safe shipping. So if you go out in open water, like in the Mississippi River, Gulf of Mexico, storms and early on pirates and all that, so the insurance rates were very high. But if you could have an inland route, or an intra-coastal, by the coast, or in the coast, waterway, then it's much cheaper and better. So, and this intra-coastal waterway then is going to be built in stages with a big national priority from Texas all the way through the panhandle of Florida, weaving way all the way in. And a big part of that always is going to be from Lake Pontchartrain to, all along the coast. So this is early on, it's like 1700s on, it's going to be built. So, the intracoastal waterway that we know it, of course, is that Laurel Parks, kind of by the Parish Road Bridge. It's going to be part of the Mr. Go as well. But I at least had no idea that that's designed, so there's another, so that you don't have to go out in Mississippi, but there's the rest of the intra-coastal waterway, inland waterway, that goes to Texas it goes on Mississippi River for a little bit, but then it's like 25 miles south of Baton Rouge. You go, I guess, through logs and go down through the Louisiana inland way, and you can sail all the way from Texas to Florida, not an open sea. I mean, maybe everybody knows that. I just did not know. I was fascinated by that. Right, so, and the Gulf Intracoastal Waterway has a very fascinating history as well. All right, so moving on then, so where the Intracoastal Waterway connects is through the Industrial Canal, through the Locks Industrial Canal, so it can get, through along the coast, and then going along the coast into the Mississippi to then go to Mississippi and then continue on. So the Industrial Canal, or more technically the Inner Harbor Navigation Canal, was incredibly important, and it was built from 1918 to 1923. Not good very good for the country, for New Orleans, all that kind of stuff. Not good for New Orleans at the time, but oh well. And it's going to be key to World War II efforts. A lot of Higgins boats and all the manufacturing is done there. It's apparently a point of embarkation. So very, very important in World War II, which is the 1940s. So it's a big deal. Thus, it becomes a national priority to bring up this idea that we've taught in many of our chapters going back to the 1700s. And that is because the Mississippi River is so long and winding and dangerous and all that stuff, to build a canal that links the Gulf of Mexico to New Orleans, not through the Mississippi River. We talked a lot of failed, the Fire Canal and other stuff, a lot of failed attempts, but that was a key thing. They're always in St. Bernard. And so the history continues, where after the World War II, it becomes a national priority, not just for economics, but for protecting the country and everything, to possibly build this waterway for Mr. Go. All right, so, or the Mississippi River Gulf Outlet. So it's a big part of that. All right, so right after World War II, in other words, for this national approach is 1956, Congress will authorize the Mississippi River Gulf Outlet, and it had very, very high hopes. The rationale was, as we talked about, to cut 40 miles off the shipment routes by not having to go up the winding Mississippi. So it'd be 40 miles less, as well as with the boosters of it. They envisioned that there would be no more container ships or big bulk ships going to New Orleans. That those wharves would be used for something else. All that, in theory, would be moved up and down the Mr. Go. So there'd be all this manufacturing, all this shipping would be, and the way it was sold in a way, it'd be an economic boom for St. Bernard with all these jobs, right? All this river traffic, all that kind of stuff. So that was the hope, but let's just say that in reality, it didn't really work out. All right, so we'll see that one of the reasons it did not, anyway, so at the time, the quote was, observers predicted the Mississippi River would be free of port facilities by the year 2000, right, which did not happen. And so one of the reasons that it did not happen in retrospect was that the ship would back up, waiting on the Industrial Canal lock. So they have to wait so long to get through the lock to the Mississippi that it just didn't make sense. It took too long. All right, so it didn't work out, but I did see as well that there was plans to build 2 pretty serious canals. Maybe y'all know about that, like through the heart of St. Bernard Parish, to overcome all that out of the map, which would have been even worse. All right, so it didn't really work. So this is what it is eventually going to look like as Mississippi River Gulf Outlet going through. And so the reality of it did not work at all, as we'll see that the land erosion is gonna allow salt water to come up to do even more. Get a picture of that. So this is what it looked like early on. It was designed as one, obviously narrow canal with port facilities built all along it. But very soon, it's gonna look like this. I'm sure everybody knows the story that the salt water is gonna come up, erode even more. Kind of a bad thing that happened. Even more so with which I'm not knowing about too, the so-called spoil levees. That with natural levees, the overflow would bring more soil with it and plant vegetation and all that kind of stuff. But it's spoil levees where it's built, where the land is built on the side, so it builds up these kind of unnatural, artificial, whatever levees that don't allow the overflow, which made it even worse. So anyway, so it's going to get pretty massive, as well as with the saltwater intrusion and loss of wetlands, as well as no new jobs being provided. Very few ships ended up making it through. So it was a disaster. Well, when it started, it was about 600 feet wide, as we'll talk about something about the disaster in a little bit. So, but the construction, which was interesting, it did start construction in the 4 phases. You can see them there. I saw that maybe the first ship that went through was in 1963, called the Del Sud, whatever. So it's now 600 feet wide. So they're going to stop the widening and all that in 1968. And of course, as we know, it's going to continue on. It's going to work out to be incredibly expensive to maintain compared to the ships that come through. I think we all know that story. So yeah, just by 1989, but you can think any date with these. The key being even before Hurricane Katrina, but the Army Corps of Engineers speculated in 1989 in a report that maybe 3,400 acres of fresher and intermediate marsh was lost, 10,300 acres of brackish marsh, 4,200 acres of saline marsh, on and on and on. All right, so crazy amount, and 1,500 acres of cypress swamps and levee forests. All right, so continued on with that, and so others increased from there. All right, so but I'm going to end there very quickly. I haven't gone over an hour, which is apparently what I do in 30 minutes. I thought for sure I'd do it this time, but just so you know, this is the last time I can be wrong.